Hey guys, tonight we're taking a midnight stroll through ancient Rome. Not the postcard version with shiny columns and clean tunics, but the real streets. The ones that hum with the quiet rhythm of sandals on stone, the slosh of buckets. And yes, a very particular smell hanging in the air. It's not wine, it's not roses, it's something else, something unmistakable, something, well, human. You see, tonight's story begins in a place where dignity holds its nose and cleanliness takes on a very peculiar flavor. We're talking about a world where people washed their clothes with, brace yourself, urine. And not just any clothes, but the stately flowing togas of senators and poets and philosophers. Yeah, if you're imagining freshly pressed robes swishing, dramatically down marble steps, just know that somewhere in that elegant fabric's past was a bucket of pee. You probably wouldn't have survived long here if you had a sensitive nose or a fragile ego. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know. In the comments, where in the world are you listening from and what time is it? Midnight in Manila, 2 a.m. in Toronto? I'm curious. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey. Together, you're walking alone down a narrow Roman alley. The cobblestones are slick under your sandals, still damp from the day's heat. The buildings on either side lean toward each other like old men trading secrets. There's a faint glow ahead, flickering firelight from an open workshop. And as you draw closer, a peculiar smell greets you like a familiar but uninvited friend. It's acrid, sour, oddly sharp. You wrinkle your nose instinctively. Somewhere, someone's whistling a tuneless melody. Then you see them, two men, sleeves rolled up, pouring liquid from clay pots into a stone trough. One of them is barefoot, standing ankle-deep in the stuff, rhythmically stomping like he's trying to crush grapes. But it's not grapes, it's laundry. And the liquid? It's, yes, exactly what you think it is. Welcome to the fullonicae, the Roman laundromat. Open late, open early, open always, because in Rome appearances matter. And keeping your toga dazzlingly white, that's practically a social duty. The worker looks up at you and grins, teeth white against the lantern light. Want a shift? He jokes. It toughens the skin and clears the sinuses. You decline politely. Around you, amphoria stacked in corners, each sealed with wax and marked with names, not of perfume, of donors. Public urinals, you'll later learn, are only the first step in a surprisingly efficient civic recycling system. Every alley seems to have one, a terracotta receptacle where passers-by relieve themselves, dutifully contributing to the greater good. You could call it liquid gold. The Romans did, though probably not with a straight face. And believe it or not, this pungent practice wasn't some forgotten back-alley quirk. It was part of a thriving economy. Urine was prized for its ammonia content, which broke down oils. Hand stains better than any lavender-scented detergent you can buy today. Of course, the lavender smelled better, but the pee got results. You see a young apprentice carrying a basket of unwashed garments. He tips them into the trough beside the man who's still stomping with resigned enthusiasm. The fabrics bubble, faintly in the mix like a witch's brew if the witch had very strange laundry needs. It's all about the timing, the man says, half to himself. Too long, and the fabric stiffens. Too short, and the stink stays. He steps aside, wipes his hands on an already soiled rag, and gestures toward another basin filled with ash and chalk. After the soak, we finish it with this. Neutralizes the smell and lifts the fibers. Makes the toga gleam like moonlight. You nod as if you understand. In truth, you're still trying to recover from the idea that some togas have essentially been marinated in what amounts to public restroom runoff. Suddenly, dry clean only feels less intimidating. A woman walks in, draping a folded tunic over her arm. She's older, her hands rough, her eyes sharp. Don't let him fool you, she says. Half these men can't tell fresh from foul. You want bright whites, you ask me. You can't help but ask, how do you know when it's ready? She leans in conspiratorially. When it no longer makes your eyes water. Classic Roman logic. As the night wears on, the fullonicae hums with activity. Workers stomp, stir, and scrub. Clothes are wrung and draped over lines that stretch across the alleyway, fluttering like flags in a breeze too tired to carry them. The moon casts everything in silver, even the puddles. You hear snatches of gossip, a senator's affair, a merchant's bankruptcy, someone's toga ruined by too much lie. In this city, the laundry knows all. It's a running joke among the fullones, that's what they call themselves. Tell me what you wear, and I'll tell you who you lie with. But not everything here is jokes and laundry tips. The work is hard, the chemicals sting, the smell clings. And although history tends to ignore these workers, their calloused feet and urine-drenched days are what kept Rome looking pristine. Some historians still debate the exact composition of these early detergents. Was ash more effective than chalk? Did they boil the fabrics or just soak them? One thing's clear, the fullonicae wasn't just a place to clean clothes. It was a social equalizer, a gossip hub and an olfactory battlefield. As you turn to leave, a breeze finally wafts down the alley, carrying with it a strange blend of ammonia, soap, and something faintly floral. Maybe from a nearby bakery, or perhaps from one of those early attempts at covering the scent. You don't know what's more impressive, that they figured out how to clean with pee, or that they managed to do it while laughing about it. Either way, you step back into the Roman night, your imagination fully stained, but your toga, at least in theory, perfectly white. You wander farther along the Roman street, the smell of the fullonicae slowly fading behind you, though it clings to your nostrils like an over-enthusiastic puppy. The lamps flicker on doorsteps, and in the distance, the faint creak of wooden wheels and the rhythmic clop of hooves echo down the cobbles. Rome never truly sleeps. It just naps with one eye open. You pause near a stone wall where a curious little plaque is bolted above a recessed clay pot. You blink. Wait. Is that another urinal? Yes. Yes, it is. But this one's special. You've stumbled upon one of the many public urinals dotted around the city, tucked into side streets, between bathhouses, even just off marketplaces. Not that different from your average modern alley corner, except this one's official, legal, encouraged even. Because here in Rome, bodily waste is taxed, at least the part that comes out liquid. You peer closer. There's an inscription, scratched into the wall, a name, a date, and the faint mark of a local tax collector. It hits you, this isn't just a pea pot, it's revenue. And it all began with one emperor, and a very strange sense of thrift. Enter Emperor Vespasian. You may not know him as well as his flashier predecessor Nero, or his paranoid successor Domitian, but Vespasian had one glorious legacy that's still whispered about by tax officials and sanitation historians everywhere. He taxed urine. Literally, picture this. It's 70-something AD, the empire's a little financially soggy. Civil wars don't pay for themselves, and Vespasian needs funds. He looks around and decides, if fullers are using urine to clean clothes, and if people are, well, producing gallons of it anyway, why not get a slice of the stream? So he levies a tax on public urinals. Not on the people who relieve themselves, mind you. That would be weird even for Rome, but on the fullers who collect the, product. You glance back at that pot. Somewhere, someone once paid to scoop pee out of that. Imagine getting a monthly invoice for extracted bodily fluids, 30 denarii. Of course, not everyone appreciated Vespasian's fiscal creativity. His own son, Titus, is rumored to have found the whole idea disgusting. And here's where it gets so Roman. Vespasian, perhaps with a raised eyebrow and the patience of a man who's explained this more than once, held a coin under his son's nose and said, "Money does not stink. Pecunia non olet." You can almost hear the dry chuckle in his voice, the ancient equivalent of cash is cash, kid. And honestly, he had a point. Today, Rome even has public toilets called Vespasiani in his honor. It's not often you get urinals named after you. That's legacy. You take a few steps back, imagining a line of fullers with sloshing buckets, grumbling about tax forms and trying to make sure their liquid gold doesn't evaporate before the next delivery. Did they label their buckets? Did someone ever mix them up at the collection point? These are the questions historians don't put in textbooks, but absolutely should. You follow a narrow passage behind the forum where shadows stretch long and everything smells of old stone and toasted barley. You pass another collection jar. this one with a small bench beside it, perhaps for those who like to linger. A man leans against the wall nearby, middle-aged, robes rumpled, face lined like a well-folded map. He sees you looking and grins. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asks. You shake your head. He nods knowingly. "Thought so. Only newcomers stop and read the P-plaques." You ask him about the tax. He laughs, a soft, breathy chuckle that seems to echo off the walls. "Vespasian? Oh, he was clever. Annoying, but clever. Made a lot of us rethink how we viewed, well, the natural order of things." He looks toward a cart being pushed by two apprentices. On top, 4 sealed amphorae, labeled in careful ink. "Back in my father's day," he continues, "we just threw it into the gutter. Now it funds bridges, can't argue with that." He reaches into his satchel and pulls out a folded scrap of linen, freshly laundered, with that unmistakable stiffness of fabric that's been stomped, soaked, and sun-dried within an inch. Of its life, smells cleanish. "You don't ask too many questions," he advises, slipping it back into his bag, "or you'll never wear anything again without thinking of the smell." You thank him, with a nod and a grateful step back, and make your way down the road, past more public pots and a quiet temple where even the statues seem to hold their breath. Somewhere a cat meows from a rooftop, a breeze stirs the hem of your tunic, and you wonder, just for a moment, what modern taxes would look like if government still thought this creatively. Income tax? Nah, let's just tax. Air fresheners. Some historians still argue about the real motivation behind the urine tax. Was it purely financial, a social commentary, a way to quietly regulate an odorous industry? We may never know. But we do know this. Only in Rome could you find yourself elbow deep in bodily waste and consider it a perfectly respectable business. You pass one final pot. This one oddly polished, perhaps recently emptied. Someone scratched a heart into the base. Ancient graffiti. Maybe from a romantic fuller, maybe from someone with a very niche sense of humor. And as you move toward the next corner, the alleys grow wider. A warm light glows ahead. You hear the soft slap, slap, slap of feet stomping wet fabric. Looks like you found your way to the source. The fullonicae is just around the bend. Again, Rome is a circle like that, always leading you back to the same strange, wonderful places. You step through a low archway and find yourself once more in the realm of the fullonicae. But this time, it's not just any corner operation. This is a proper laundry house, one of the largest in the Subura district. The floors are stone, the easy troughs are carved with care, and there's even a half-shaded courtyard where togas hang like ghostly sails from every beam. A man in a dusty tunic greets you with a nod, motioning you inside. "Step lightly," he murmurs. "We're in the thick of it now." And thick it is. The air is saturated, warm, damp, with layers of vinegar, lye, ash, and that ever-present ammonia tang. It's like walking into a potion shop that's forgotten which potions were edible. You follow the man, let's call him Marcus, past rows of stone basins. These aren't random tubs. Each has its purpose. The first basin is for soaking the garments in water and fermented urine. The second is for scrubbing, often with a mix of clay and fuller's earth. The third is for rinsing with clean water and maybe some crushed laurel leaves if the client paid extra. Finally, there's the drying zone where garments are stretched, fluffed and occasionally beaten into shape. Literally. Marcus steps into a shallow basin and begins to stomp. His legs churn like pistons, and he holds onto a wooden beam for balance. He's not alone. On either side, 2 other men stomp with equal dedication, all in sync, like a very odd, very smelly dance team. You stand beside the basin, watching in fascination and mild horror. "Tough on the calves," Marcus grunts, "but better than the mines." He gestures to the cloth underfoot. Deep red tunics, probably from a wealthy client who likes a touch of drama. You ask him how long he's been working here. "Since I was 14. Now I'm 27. Or 30. Depends who you ask." He flashes a grin. Not many places you can stomp on noblemen's clothes and call it honest work. The fabric bubbles beneath him, the smell wafting up like a warm, damp slap. You tiptoe past another worker who's grinding something with a mortar and pestle. It smells oddly minty. Juniper and pine, he explains, keeps the mold down, adds a nice finish. You resist asking if it actually works. In the corner, a small wooden shrine holds a figurine of Minerva, goddess of wisdom and craft. Someone has left a sprig of rosemary at her feet, along with a crude cup half filled with what you hope is wine. Prayers for clean clothes, Marcus murmurs, following your gaze. And for no fleas. You step into the drying area next, where dozens of tunics and togas sway gently on thick ropes. Some are white, some cream, some suspiciously beige. You reach out to touch one and recoil. It's crunchy. That one's not done yet, says a young girl folding linens nearby. Still needs the ash rinse. She looks up at you. You're not a taxman, are you? You shake your head quickly. She relaxes. Good. Last one who came here left with ash in his sandals. You smile nervously and back away. A large clay pot nearby catches your eye. It's been sealed with wax and has a handwritten label. Aged 7 days. Do not open. You raise an eyebrow. Marcus sees you looking and chuckles. The strong stuff. We let it ferment longer and for tougher stains. You glance at the sealed top. It looks like something you'd bury, not wash with. One of the older workers nearby, missing half his teeth and humming a catchy tune, leans over and whispers, I once lost my lunch just from sniffing that jar. You believe him. And yet this place hums with pride. Everyone knows their task. There's camaraderie in the stink, rhythm in the work. They joke, they tease, they scrub. It's hard work, sure, but it's respected work. That might surprise you. You'd think fullers would be looked down on. After all, they deal in filth. But in Rome, they're essential. Part artisan, part magician, part town gossip. Some historians still debate just how much social status fullers truly had. Were they honored tradespeople or tolerated outcasts? The records are vague. But their presence, loud, smelly, undeniable, shaped the streets of Rome just as surely as the legions shaped its empire. Marcus steps out of the basin, wiping his arms with a rag that frankly needs a rag of its own. He grins again, the lines on his face deepening. People always think this job is just about stomping and stink, he says, but it's also about trust. You hand someone your toga, your finest, most visible garment, and you expect it back cleaner than it left. That takes skill and guts. You nod and he slaps your back, then instantly apologizes when he realizes he's wet from the knees down. You continue your slow tour around the fullonicae, now more attuned to the routine, the stomp, scrub, rinse, dry cycle, the hushed banter, the occasional curse when a cloth tears or a client demands impossible brightness. A boy runs through, nearly slipping, carrying a bucket with both hands. Fresh collection, he shouts. Marcus sighs. That'll be another amphora for aging. Guess we're making a vintage. You shake your head, amused. In some strange way, it's comforting. The stink, the stomping, the simple, bizarre effectiveness of it all. This is Rome, the city of aqueducts and emperors, poets and peapots. As you leave the workshop, your clothes cling a little more than before. Maybe it's the humidity, maybe it's sympathy sweat. Either way, the fullonicae has left its mark, if not on your fabric, then certainly in your imagination. And somewhere behind you, Marcus stomps on, carrying the weight of a civilization's laundry on his calves. You're not sure if you admire him or pity him. By now, the sun is beginning to edge higher over the terracotta rooftops, casting a soft golden wash over the waking city. But down here in the underbelly of daily life, the fullers are still hard at work, as if time itself was scrubbed out with the rest of the grime. You follow a narrow path lined with clay urns and soot-darkened walls until you arrive at a quieter corner of the neighborhood, not exactly peaceful, but less frantic than the fullonicae's thunderous stomp and splash. Rhythm. Here you meet Gaius. Gaius is a wiry man with calloused hands and an eternally skeptical brow. He's in the process of sorting out a delivery. Togas, tunics, linens of all kinds, each folded with military precision and tagged with tiny lead tokens marked by the client's names or symbols. This isn't a guessing game. Roman citizens are not the kind to be pleased when their tunic comes back 3 shades darker and smelling like fermented disaster. New face, he grumbles without looking up. Are you here to help or just stare? You mutter something vague about being curious. Gaius sighs, gestures to a bench and points to a particularly suspect-looking pile of cloth. Then you can watch while I deal with this. The pile is damp. And heavy. Gaius lifts a corner, sniffs cautiously, and immediately regrets it. Ah, another senator's cloak. They always wear too much oil and perfume. Makes the whole batch stink up like a brothel's curtain. He doesn't seem angry, though. Just resigned. Like someone who has made peace with the fact that his job will never ever smell nice. As he begins the process, you watch, mesmerized. First, the soak. Into the basin it goes, submerged in a mixture that looks suspiciously like soup, if the chef had long since given up on life. Gaius pokes it with a stick, then drags over a small bucket of crushed potash, alkaline salt gathered from wood ash. This breaks down the fats, he explains. You want that greasy sheen off a toga? You need ash and thyme, and sometimes curses. He mutters one under his breath just to be safe. Next comes the stomping. Gaius, despite his wiry frame, jumps in like it's just another Tuesday, which it is. He stomps methodically, working the fabric underfoot like dough, his toes searching out folds and creases with the experience of a man who has stepped on more cloth than furniture in his life. So, he says between stomps, people think we just throw things in urine and hope for the best. Truth is, it's a science. Balance of ingredients, ratios, timing. He stops, wipes his brow, then frowns. Also, a lot of yelling. A boy scampers past, nearly knocking over a basket of chalk powder. Gaius shouts something that sounds anatomically improbable. The boy laughs and disappears behind a curtain of drying tunics. You notice another basin nearby, this one bubbling faintly. Gaius follows your gaze and snorts. Oh, that's the secret blend. Some idiot down the block started adding old wine to the mix. Thinks it makes things smell better. It doesn't, just attracts bees. He spits to the side. And drunk bees are no joke. You nod solemnly, because somehow that feels like a universal truth. As the cloak finishes its soak, Gaius lifts it out with a wooden paddle, transferring it to a rinse basin filled with cool, clear water. A rare sight, that actual clean water, in a fuller's workshop. You half expect someone to charge admission just to see it. You lean in to help, but Gaius waves you off. Takes practice. One bad ring and you stretch the hem. Then it looks like you're wearing your mother's tablecloth. He presses the fabric between two slanted stones, squeezing out the liquid with steady pressure. You watch, fascinated, as the cloudy water trickles down the groove into a gutter that leads somewhere even less glamorous than this place, if that's possible. Finally, he lifts the now limp toga and carries it over to the drying rack. It drips quietly, joining the others like a ghost at rest. You ask him how long it'll take to dry. Depends on the wind, he says, and whether the gods feel like cooperating. He pauses. They usually don't. You sit beside him on a bench, shaded by linen sheets fluttering overhead. For a moment the sun catches just right, and the cloth glows softly, like lanterns in a quiet temple. Gaius stretches his legs, ankles cracking audibly. You know, he says, people in the villas up on Palatine Hill. They don't think about how their clothes get clean, just expect it like it's magic. He picks up a brush and begins cleaning grime from his fingernails with methodical strokes. But we know better. We make the magic, in basins and buckets and a lot of very questionable liquids. He looks at you, eyes serious now. Cleanliness isn't just about soap, it's about dignity, pride, even if it smells like wet goat. You smile, unsure what to say. Gaius shrugs and stands. Back to it. Got a toga with olive oil stains from some senator's birthday orgy. You blink. He holds up his hands. Don't ask. Just know that olive oil never comes out. Not fully. He walks away, disappearing behind a rack of drying cloaks. And you sit there alone for a moment, wrapped in the warm, strange hum of the fullonicae. Workers chatter, basins slosh, cloth rustles, and somewhere someone yells about missing sandals. It's not glamorous, it's not clean, but it is Rome. And somehow you understand a little more now. Not just about how they washed their clothes, but how they lived their lives, soaked in grit, rinsed in pride, hung to dry under the ever-watchful sun. You leave the courtyard behind, the rhythmic squelch of Gaius's basin still echoing faintly in your ears. The sun's higher now, dappling the narrow alleys with golden light, but there's no escaping the persistent perfume of the fuller's trade. Even the pigeons on the roof tiles look mildly offended. You wander toward the market district, following the scent of baking bread, a welcome shift from the ammonia fog that's clung to your tunic like a needy ghost. As you pass a shady arcade, you spot something curious. A neat row of little stone recesses built into a wall, each lined with glazed terracotta. Another urinal? Maybe. But the real surprise is the queue of citizens waiting patiently. Men. Women, even a small child holding a clay pot nearly half her size. They're all here for the same thing: civic contribution. Voluntary, but encouraged. A man ahead of you catches your puzzled look and grins. It's not just charity, it's patriotism. Rome needs our contributions. You raise an eyebrow. He nods toward a full amphora resting at his feet. This, one's going straight to the Fuller's Guild. My family's proud. Our household fills one every 3 days. We're very hydrated. You manage a smile. Barely. That's when it dawns on you. This isn't just a quirk of Roman sanitation. It's a public service. P is currency. A weird, warm, occasionally splashed-on form of civic duty. And Rome has figured out how to monetize it. You follow the man down the road toward a modest-looking office, a low building with a slate roof, and a sign out front featuring a pair of crossed amphorae. This, he explains, is the collection point. Here the state weighs the jars, logs the donors, and assigns credit, sometimes even tax deductions, to regular contributors. You imagine filing your annual taxes and having a box labeled "Number of amphorae donated, liquid." Inside, a scribe in a crisp white tunic stands behind a wooden counter, stylus poised. "Name?" he asks. The man gives it. "Number of vessels?" "1, sealed." The scribe checks a tablet, then gestures to a boy who carries the amphora into the back room. The scribe scribbles, nods, and hands over a small wooden token. "Redeemable at the bathhouse," he says flatly. "Next." You step outside before you're accidentally added to the ledger. The man pats your shoulder on the way out. "You don't have to be rich to help Rome shine," he says with a wink. "You just have to drink a lot of wine." As the line shuffles along, you notice something else, subtle but present, the social dynamics at play. Some families arrive with pride, others with embarrassment. Some sneak in, dropping their amphorae and vanishing like guilty gladiators. Others strut like they've won a civic medal. And why not? In a society where appearance is everything, where your toga says more about you than your words ever could, playing a role in public cleanliness is status. Strange, sticky status, but status nonetheless. You take a slow stroll through the Subura, watching as amphorae are loaded onto wagons, their lids sealed with wax, each labeled meticulously. You hear one merchant boasting to another that his family's output helped whiten the garments of the Vestal virgins. "That's basically divine laundry," he says proudly. The other man shrugs. "My cousin's pee got used for the emperor's cloak." Beat that. You walk on, marveling at the fact that there is competition, even bragging rights, over who contributes to the great Roman laundry economy. But not everyone is thrilled. You pass an older woman scowling at a public receptacle. "Disgusting," she mutters. "I remember when people just did this in the river like normal folk." You don't correct her. That river now carries more sewage than a politician's promises. You pause at a street corner, where a troop of children is playing a game with flat stones, occasionally kicking one amphora like a ball until an elderly man shoos them away. "Careful," he huffs. "That's for the Fullers. You crack one and the whole alley smells like a drunken goat." You step aside just in time to avoid another clumsy cart rolling past, 2 barrels wobbling dangerously. The driver leans over. "Urgent delivery," he shouts. "Client's toga got vomit stains and a poetry reading at noon." Classic Rome. But as you walk, your mind lingers on this strange form of civic exchange. It's brilliant in a very Roman way. Take something everyone produces, something nobody wants, and turn it into something essential, then slap a tax on it. Some historians still argue over whether Vespasian's urine tax was a stroke of economic genius or just a cruel joke that got out of hand. There are scrolls and scraps debating whether this was the first time the empire had officially commodified a bodily function. Others suggest earlier empires had similar systems: Mesopotamians with oil residue, Egyptians with, well, fish paste, but only Rome institutionalized it, turned it into an economy, a habit, a cultural marker, and of course a running joke, you turn the corner and bump straight into a man selling novelty amphora lids. "Scented with myrrh," he calls. "Lavender, juniper, cinnamon, mask the funk and feel refined." A woman nearby scoffs. "We don't need perfume. We need fewer senators wearing the same tunic for 3 weeks." You catch her eye and smile. She nods at you. "We all do our part," she says. "Some donate coin, some donate, well, other fluids." You think of Gaius, of Marcus, of the quiet pride in their stomp. You think of the man earlier who stood proud over his amphora, and you realize in this odd, fragrant, full-to-the-brim ecosystem of sweat, stain, and civic spirit, there's something genuinely Roman in it all. They didn't waste a thing, not time, not effort, not even pee. The smell of amphorae fades unmercifully as you follow the cobbled road uphill toward a quieter stretch of the city. Here the air is a little cleaner, the shadows softer, and the toga game noticeably stronger. You've reached a more affluent neighborhood, where the homes are decorated with marble porticos, ivy-covered walls, and the occasional peacock judging you from a rooftop. You pause in a small plaza, just in time to witness something you weren't expecting: laundry as theater. At the far end of the square, in full view of half a dozen gossiping matrons and 2 very bored-looking guards, a team of fullers is hard at work, not behind closed doors, but in the open air. Buckets splash, fabrics flutter, and the occasional shoe slips in soap-slick runoff. And the audience. They are into it. One woman whispers to another, eyes narrowing. "Look at that rinse. Not nearly thorough enough. She'll never get that. Stain out of her son's tunic." Another leans in. "That's the widow Calpurnia's laundry. I recognize that embroidery anywhere. Shame about her son." The first woman raises a brow. "Oh, what happened?" "Oil spill at the bathhouse. Slipped, exposed more than modesty allows. Toga never recovered." You inch closer to the spectacle and see for yourself. The workers are fast, coordinated, and a little performative. One of them even flips a tunic mid-air, catching it like a stage prop, before flinging it onto a drying line. Someone claps. Welcome to the glamorous side of grime. You watch as a young fuller begins rubbing a toga with chalk powder. She sprinkles it like fairy dust, folds the fabric and pats it gently before hanging it to dry. Another man hoists a water jug over his head and pours with a flourish that makes a few onlookers gasp, as if he were painting the ceiling of a chapel. You realize something. For the wealthy, laundry isn't just maintenance. It's performance. A status symbol. To have your garments washed in full public view, to see your clothes expertly handled by the best trained fullers in the city, is a subtle but powerful message. Look at me. I am clean, I am proper, and I pay others to do the dirty work. You drift to the edge of the crowd, catching sight of a tunic laid flat on a polished marble slab. The fuller tending it is older, dignified, with a thick mustache that curls slightly, at the edges like an expensive scroll. He catches your gaze and gestures you closer. "This one's from Senator Flaccus," he murmurs. "Wants it snow white for his daughter's wedding. It came in looking like it had lost a jewel with a wine. Juk." He begins brushing it in long, even strokes, humming a lullaby that's both soothing and oddly rhythmic. You listen, lulled by the routine, the repetition, the sheer quiet pride he brings to the work. "What's that powder?" you ask. "Pumice. Dust. Ground fine, softens the fabric, finishes the surface." You nod, filing that away next to "How to ruin a friendship. Return their toga with creases." A girl next to him is untangling a pair of undergarments. She wrinkles her nose. "Don't. Look at me like that," she tells the garment. "You know what you did." You smile. Behind her, 2 more fullers are arguing over a set of towels, apparently delivered late and covered in mystery spots. One insists they need another soak in fermented vinegar. The other suggests they just tell the client they were meant to look like that. Decorative blotching, he calls it. Across the way, an older woman is folding a cloak so carefully it might as well be a sacred scroll. She speaks to no one in particular. "He wants pleats like the last Saturnalia." I said, "What pleats?" He said, "The pleats of love." I said, "You wore a tunic." You're beginning to suspect that fullers are Rome's greatest, untapped comedic resource. Some historians still puzzle over why laundry became such a public act in Rome. Was it simply convenience? A way to dry clothes faster in the city's congested layout? Or was it, as others believe, a social performance, a way to visibly demonstrate one's investment in appearance, dignity, and smell? No one can say for sure. But standing here, in this open-air laundry theatre, it feels obvious. The citizens. Walking by slow down, not to help, not to scorn, but to watch. Some comment, some compare. Others mentally note which fuller they might hire for next week's party prep. You spot a sign above the wash basins, hand-carved in wood. Whiteness guaranteed, or your donation back. Below that, we reserve the right to define whiteness. You. Raise your brows, clever. Very Roman, a pair of clients arrives, their arms full of linen. One of them is muttering about milk stains, while the other whispers something about gladiator sweat. The fullers spring into action. Buckets are filled. Ash is sifted. Chalk is scattered like snow. You sit on a warm stone ledge and simply watch the flow of water, the flick of fabric. The sun slowly drying the day's dampness into stiff creases of accomplishment. It's all strangely soothing, meditative. The public nature of the work adds a strange dignity to the task. This isn't hidden. It's out here for all to see. Celebrated. Laughed at. Admired. You close your eyes for a moment and just listen. To the rustle of cloth, the gurgle of basins, the lilt of voices rising and falling in casual gossip and quiet pride. A woman nearby sighs contentedly. There's nothing like the smell of fresh linen, she says. You glance at her questioningly. Compared to the before smell, she adds with a knowing smirk. Fair enough. The sun edges past noon. A breeze kicks up, rustling the drying garments. Like the sails of sleeping ships, you stand brushing off your tunic, now slightly fresher just by proximity. And as you walk away, you feel, somehow, lighter. As if you've not just witnessed a routine chore, but a small slice of Roman. So cleanliness, it seems, is next to Romanness. The street narrows again as you follow the sound of bells, soft rhythmic chimes echoing between the walls of two tall insulae. The breeze carries something new this time, not the sour sting of laundry work, but an aroma, both flowery and faintly medicinal. You follow your nose carefully. You've learned your lesson in Rome, and come upon a tiny stall tucked between a cobbler's workshop and a shop selling wax tablets. The stall's owner is a man draped in lilac linen, standing beside an array of glass vials, clay jars, and bundles of herbs that look like they were just stolen from a very chic kitchen garden. He greets you with a bow that almost knocks over a stack of rosewater amphorae. Welcome, traveler. You smell experienced. You blink. Fullonicae, yes, he says, tapping his nose knowingly. I can always tell. You have the faint note of last week's vinegar. You nod. It feels easier than correcting him. I, he announces, am Lucius of the Fifth Scent, specialist in the masking arts, fragrance consultant to the discerning and desperate. You look around. His wares include everything from jasmine oil to crushed cypress, from resin balls to tiny boxes labeled emergency mint. One is simply labeled hope. Lucius sweeps his arm dramatically toward a tray of small, rolled cloth sachets. These, he declares, are the future of hygiene. Place one in your toga folds and walk with pride, even near fullers. You raise an eyebrow. Do they work? He shrugs. Better than nothing. And nothing's not cheap these days. You pick one up, sniff cautiously. It's not terrible. A mix of rosemary and something vaguely resembling fennel. Lucius leans in. That one's popular among poets, smells like confidence and poor decisions. He shows you another. This one? Juniper, myrrh, and a hint of sea salt. For those who want to smell like they have a villa near Ostia, even if they live above a tavern. A woman bustles up beside you, clutching a pair of gloves and a look of restrained horror. Do you have anything strong enough for gladiator socks? Lucius doesn't flinch. Lavender bombs, 2 per sandal. Light them after sundown. She drops a coin in his hand and vanishes. You ask him if he sells much to fullers themselves. Lucius grimaces. No, they say the smell proves the job is done right. Some even claim it's character building. I say it's dinner ruining. He leans closer. Though between you and me, I once sold a bulk batch to a fullonicae near the forum. Said a senator's wife demanded her laundry be divinely scented, whatever that means. You imagine a toga infused with so much myrrh it confuses half the temple priests. You imagine the gods themselves wrinkling their noses. You ask if he's ever worked directly with the emperor's household. Lucius preens like a peacock with a sponsorship deal. Once, briefly, a consultation. They wanted something that whispered of conquest and piety. I gave them pine and crushed laurel, told them it was what generals wore after victory. He pauses. I may have exaggerated. Some historians argue that Roman perfumery was as much art as alchemy, equal parts botanical knowledge and shameless salesmanship. Recipes varied wildly, and preservation methods were inconsistent, but one thing was constant: the desire to smell like anything other than where you'd been, especially if where you'd been was a laundry trough. Lucius holds up a final vial, pale green, swirled like river glass. This, he whispers, is my masterpiece, the anti-odor. It neutralizes everything. You lean closer. Even fermented pea, he nods solemnly. Especially that. You ask what's in it. He grins. Trade secret, but it may involve goat milk basil and a whisper from the Sibyl. You don't ask further. As you move to leave, Lucius calls after you. If you come across any amphorae marked experimental batch number 3, run. That one backfired. You promise to remember. Back on the main road, you pass a group of young men chatting animatedly, one of them sniffing his tunic sleeve with concern. You catch a fragment of conversation. Said it smelled like justice and rosemary, but I think it's just fish oil. A few steps further, a well-dressed matron waves a fan under her nose and mutters, "Even the fountains smell like laundry these days." And perhaps they do, but now you know why. Rome is a city of illusions, ambition, and very selective memory. Its citizens go to great lengths to present the best version of themselves, even if it takes a scented pouch, a chalk bath, or a public performance involving a lot of foam. You pause at a fountain, washing your hands in cold water that smells faintly of mint. Someone's added petals, maybe Lucius again, marketing on the move. And for a moment, standing there in the shade, you marvel at the absurd elegance of it all. Urine, chalk, soap, perfume. Together they tell a story, of dignity preserved, of appearances curated, of smells banished and status proclaimed. Rome, at its core, is not just a city of marble and empire. It is a city determined, passionately, creatively, hilariously, to smell better than it really does. You follow the curve of the fountain's path into another residential district, where the marble gives way to dusty brick, and the street talk turns to politics and pastries. You pass vendors hawking fried dormice, a boy selling scrolls of questionable poetry, and a man yelling at a goat, though the goat seems unfazed. Typical Tuesday. And then you see it. A small crowd gathered in front of a wooden stall draped with togas of every cut and color. They hang like banners, catching the breeze, and each is marked with a tag. Gold thread, painted wax seals, carved ivory tokens. This isn't a laundry shop, it's a rental booth. "Formal wear for hire," the merchant shouts. "One day, 1 denarius, one step closer to looking like you have your life together." You pause. You've never really thought about renting. A toga. But of course, not everyone can afford a personal wardrobe full of formal wear. Toga parties, and yes, the Romans did have them, required proper attire. Weddings, funerals, trials, and any meeting with someone important all demanded you show up draped, pressed, and smelling not entirely like you walked through a wine bar. The merchant sees your curiosity and waves you over. He's in a toga, himself slightly crooked, slightly stained, but worn with undeniable confidence. You got something coming up? Court case, romantic apology, funeral where you need to look sad but respectable? You shake your head. "No worries," he says. "Just looking. These togas here, prime pieces, cleaned by the very best. Fullers, some even washed twice. He says that like it's a sacred rite. You point to a particularly elaborate toga hanging from a bronze hook. "That beauty," he says, puffing up, "senatorial style, velvet trim, Has seen the forum, the Senate steps, and, rumor has it, a flirtation with a Vestal virgin. Can't prove it. But you can feel the tension in the fabric. You chuckle. He gestures toward another rack. That section, more discreet. Ideal for meetings where you might end up arrested. You ask if people ever request used-looking togas on purpose. He winks. Smart one, yes. Some folks think a slightly worn toga adds credibility. Oh, this old thing. Been through 3 debates and a duel. People eat that up. You lift one of the garments, run your fingers over the folds. It's soft, smelled faintly of citrus and, faintly, ever so faintly, vinegar. A telltale trace. This toga's been through the full fullonicae treatment. Careful with that one, the merchant warns. Client last week tried to iron it himself with a lamp, singed the hem, claimed it was a political statement. He laughs. Around you, the clientele begins to shift. A nervous-looking man inspecting sleeve length, a woman holding up a child-sized tunic for what's clearly a very ambitious recital. A teenage boy complains that his toga makes him look like a sweaty scroll. His mother waves him off. You realize something else now. The toga isn't just a garment, it's a narrative, a social armor, a stage costume in the ongoing performance of being Roman. And just like modern fashion statements, the price, the fit, the condition, every wrinkle tells a story. Some are flattering, some less so. A matron brushes past you, holding a snow-white toga like it's made of glass. Don't let it touch the ground, she hisses to her servant. Last time it picked up donkey dust and we had to scrape. It clean. You ask the merchant what happens when a toga is returned stained beyond salvation. He shudders. We don't talk about those. We burn them, quietly, at night. But doesn't that offend the fullers? He shrugs. Fullers get paid either way. But even they have limits. Once had a tunic come back smelling like eel oil and defeat. No basin on earth could save it. You ask if there's ever been a toga so perfectly cleaned it became famous. His eyes sparkle. Oh yes, toga gloriana, legend, white as marble. Folds that flowed like river silk. Word is it was laundered only with morning dew and the tears of victorious gladiators. Never wrinkled, never stained. Worn once, vanished. Probably in the emperor's closet now. You stare at him, he shrugs. Or maybe someone just spilled garum on it and lied. Around you, the full theater of toga commerce continues. Togas, held up to the light, sniffed discreetly, folded and exchanged. Arguments arise over length, thickness and mysterious blotches that might be sauce, or worse. Some historians note that for all their pretense of simplicity, togas were wildly impractical, difficult to wear, easy to stain, and frustrating to launder. Others argue that precisely because they were impractical, they served as class markers. The more unwieldy your outfit, the less likely you were to do any actual work. It was like walking around wrapped in your tax bracket. As you step away from the stall, the merchant waves. Remember, he calls after you, a toga can't fix your life, but it can hide the parts you haven't figured out yet. You smile, your mind buzzing with the absurdity and charm of it all. Rome, the place where even your outfit had a backstory. You wander on, the image of a city draped in drama, ambition, and fabric following you like a tailwind of chalk and cologne. The sun starts its slow descent, spilling golden light onto the rooftops like someone's knocked over a jug of honey. The warmth makes the air shimmer, and your legs ache just enough to suggest you've walked the better part of Rome. But the smells, ah yes, the ever-present perfume of laundered ambition and aged urine, that still follows you faithfully. You take a left down a quieter lane where ivy creeps across cracked plaster and cats lounge like minor deities. Just as you're considering sitting down yourself, you hear a voice, hushed but urgent, from behind a stack of empty amphorae. Psst. Hey, you alone. You freeze. A head pops out. It belongs to a wiry man with nervous energy and ink-stained fingers. His tunic is clean, but not convincingly so. You sense chalk powder clinging to the edges. You looking for a deal? He whispers. Your eyes narrow. What kind of deal? The kind that doesn't smell like tax. You're intrigued. He gestures for you to follow and disappears through a wooden door disguised behind a row of hanging laundry. linens so stiff they might double as armor. Inside, the air is surprisingly pleasant, earthy, dry, cool. There's even a faint scent of pine needles and lemon peel. A candle flickers low, throwing shadows against clay walls. This is not a fullonicae. This is something else. "Welcome," the man says dramatically, "to the launderer's underground." You look around. There are baskets of folded togas, sealed jars, and, most conspicuously, a complete lack of anything labeled or taxed. "We don't pay for what comes naturally," he huffs. "That's our motto." He introduces himself as Faustus. Former fullonicae assistant, current rogue, got tired of scraping calcium off basins while Vespasian's men counted drops. He shows you the setup, an illicit operation where fullers secretly undercut state-sanctioned fullonicae. They collect their own supply, barter with shady bathhouse attendants, and use homebrewed methods to clean garments without triggering the infamous urine tax. You ask how that's possible. He pulls out a jar of something murky and glows. With pride, fermented fig sap and ground eggshells. Smells like a salad bar during a thunderstorm, but it works. Plus, no tax. You glance at a toga hanging nearby. It looks fine, a little crunchy, but white. And it smells vaguely like pickled olives and defiance. Another rogue launderer, a woman with soot on her cheeks and a very large paddle, leans in and whispers, "We also dilute. Amphora looks full. No one questions it." You nod, slowly understanding. The game. Some of their clients, they explain, are regular citizens who just want to save a few denarii. Others are richer folks who don't want their linens publicly processed, as they put it. One senator even pays extra for private laundering, though he insists on spritzing every item with rosewater afterwards to ward off suspicion. Faustus grins, leaning against a shelf of labeled soaps, each hand poured into waxed cups. We call this one Republican Guilt. Works wonders on ink stains. You ask if they're ever caught. "Sometimes," he says, "but we're quick. One whistle from the boy upstairs and we flip the sign, toss a toga in the fire and pretend we're candle makers." He points to a half-melted wax mold shaped suspiciously like a bar of soap. "And if the guards ask," the woman adds, "we just say the client was allergic to ammonia or truth." The room bursts into soft laughter. You spend a while among them, sipping a cup of barley tea that tastes mostly of compromise. They argue over which methods are most efficient: fig sap versus sour milk, ashes from olive wood versus date pits. It's part science, part rebellion, and all wrapped in a layer of fragrant ingenuity. Some historians dismiss such underground operations as myth or exaggeration. Tall tales whispered by fullers tired of getting taxed for their own chamber. Pot runs, but you can feel it in this room. The quiet defiance, the jokes masking genuine labor, the pride in doing it differently. Faustus walks you out through a hidden back door that opens onto a quiet alley. Before you leave, he presses a small soap tablet into your hand, soft, pine-scented, stamped with the image of a laurel leaf. "For emergencies," he says, "or nosy neighbors." You step into the fading light, the door swinging shut behind you. The street looks the same, but somehow you feel like you've glimpsed a part of Rome most don't. The subtle revolt, the whispered scrub, the laundry. That happens in shadows, and as you walk, the token in your hand still warm, you wonder just how many people out here are wearing rebel-washed togas. Probably more than you'd guess. After all, in a city where even your pee can be taxed, sometimes, the cleanest garments come from the dirtiest secrets. The alley deposits you back into a more bustling part of the city, where the smell of honeyed pastries and fresh olive oil rolls in waves across a wide piazza. It's a sensory relief, like emerging from behind the stage of a very pungent theater. You stroll toward a columned courtyard where the voices are fewer, the pace slower and the shadows long. There, in a small shaded corner, you find a group of men in animated discussion, not senators but fullers. They huddle around a makeshift table, scattered with what looks like chunks of hardened ash, bits of soap and scraps of linen in various shades of almost white. You edge closer and catch fragments of the debate. "I'm telling you chalk. Before ash, always. You hit the grease with powder first, then soak." "Nonsense, you're just masking the stain. You want to transform it." That's where heat comes in. You're all fools. Vinegar and fig ash works every time. Smells like despair, but gets results. One of them, the oldest, wearing a toga so faded it could pass for parchment, notices you listening and gestures for you to join. Don't be shy, he says with a grin. You've got the nose of someone who's seen the inside of a fullonicae. You nod. Then you've earned a seat at the round table of soap. You sit on a half-cracked stool and listen as the conversation resumes. They speak with the passion of philosophers and the exasperation of men who've spent their lives elbow deep in things that foam. The topic today: the great debate. What makes the best ancient detergent? On the table lies the evidence: powdered lime, chard, barley straw, goat fat, vinegar, even small lumps of what might be imported pumice. One man claims soap made from sheep sweet, and ash gives the brightest whites. Another swears by imported Spanish lye, caustic enough to remove stains, memories, and possibly your skin. A third, who introduces himself as Flavius, leans over confidentially and whispers, "I once experimented with snail slime. Got the idea from a Greek scroll. Didn't work, but my hands never looked better." Laughter ripples through the group. You ask them what they think of modern theories, those historians who claim the Romans just used urine and hope. Hope? One of them scoffs. Hope never got a wine stain out of a priest's robe. Another chimes in, "Some scribes say we didn't understand chemistry. Rubbish, we were accidental alchemists." Flavius gestures toward a cracked amphora. "You think I can't neutralize a vomit stain after Bacchus week? Please, give me 5 herbs, a slab of chalk, and a day without interruptions. You're handed a strip of cloth dipped in something, suspiciously blue." "Smell that," one says proudly. "You do. It smells like lemon zest, Basil, and faintly of terror." "Experimental," he says. "Supposed to be calming." You nod cautiously. "It's evocative." In the middle of the table sits a curious object, a clay tablet etched with symbols and stains. "Our testing slate," says Flavius. "Every recipe gets a trial swipe. Some of these stains are 3 years old." You peer closer. Some are labeled garum incident, ink and sweat mix, and one ominously titled goat cheese disaster. You can't help but ask, "What's the worst thing someone's brought in?" A silence falls, then someone clears his throat. "Charred oyster shell robe from a priest. Said it was ritually necessary. Took us 2 weeks." "And the most ridiculous?" Another chimes in. "A senator's son spilled perfume and tried to fix it with more perfume. Toga practically exploded." They all laugh again. The stories come faster now, of experimental mixtures that caused cloth to crumble, of garments that came out stiffer than shields, and of the one time someone tried to bleach silk. "Let's just say it was silk." One says solemnly. They talk of their tools like soldiers talk of swords, trusted brushes, favored soaking jars, secret recipes passed down like family heirlooms. Some even name their rinsing stones. One stone is called the Persuader, another Marcus the Soaker. You ask if they ever compete, and they all nod vigorously. "Oh, there are games," says Flavius. "Laundry-offs, toga trials, whiteness wars." "They held one in Ostia last summer," says another. "Winner walked away with a silver basin and a year's supply of aged ash. Second place got to do the senator's laundry for free. Third place had to explain the soap bubble incident to the magistrate. No further details are offered. Some historians still debate whether these fullers really took their craft so seriously, or if the stories are exaggerated, embroidered, like the tunics they washed. But as you sit here watching these men argue over the molecular properties of goat fat and clay, it's hard to deny the reality. This was science. This was chemistry. It just happened to smell worse and be done in sandals. As the sky turns amber, Flavius passes you a rag dipped in a fresh mixture. "Try this," he says. "Just a fingertip." You dab it gently. It smells like rosemary and smoke, oddly comforting, like a garden lit on fire by someone with excellent taste. "New formula," he says. "We call it victory over odor." You hand it back and he adds, "Patent pending, if the Senate ever allows patents." You stand to leave, and they wave you off with a final joke about toga folding competitions and an invitation to next week's ash versus chalk debate. As you step back into the street, you feel oddly inspired. Not because they've cracked the code of ancient chemistry, but because of the care, the wit, the sheer joy they take in their craft. They may wash the filth of the empire, but they do it with the flair of poets and the rigor of engineers. In Rome, even soap has a story. Evening begins to settle over Rome like a soft woolen blanket, slightly itchy, vaguely scented with wood smoke, and at this point in your journey, probably carrying a faint note of lemon-soaked linen. The city's noise dims to a hum. Sandals, scuffing, the occasional clink of amphorae, and distant laughter bouncing off columned halls. Your feet carry you upward, toward the Palatine Hill. Not quite to the Emperor's palace, but close enough to smell the prestige. Here, the roads are smoother, the marble shinier, and the togas noticeably stiffer. And that's when you see it. A small cluster of attendants gathered beneath a silk awning, anxiously inspecting a row of freshly laundered garments. Not just any garments. These are imperial togas, regal, spotless, and pressed so sharply they could probably slice garum sausage. You slow your steps. A woman in a deep crimson stola is holding one such toga up to the light, pursing her lips. "It still smells like lye," she mutters. "That's unacceptable." A younger servant fidgets nearby. "We used juniper water in the rinse twice. We even sun-dried it with rose petals. Then perhaps the rose petals were inferior." You wisely keep your distance, settling onto a nearby stone bench under a laurel tree. The scene before you unfolds like a particularly uptight play. The problem? Tomorrow is a public ceremony. The emperor himself, or at least his cousin's uncle's favorite general, will be in attendance. The garments must be flawless, the pleats must be symmetrical, and the smell must suggest divinity without resembling incense from a brothel. A taller servant steps forward, holding a carved wooden paddle. "We've consulted with the head fullonicae in Trastevere. They recommend one final rinse in honeyed ash solution and a folding process performed only by left-handed workers." There's a pause. Someone blinks. "Why left-handed?" The servant shrugs. "They say it improves the flow of the drape." You can almost hear the historians in the distance groaning, but the attendants don't question it. A young boy is promptly dispatched to find someone sinistral. You watch amused as a toga is laid out on an ivory board. A man wearing gloves and a facial expression that suggests he has seen things begins smoothing it with deliberate, reverent strokes. Another burns incense nearby, not to cleanse the air, but to gently season the fabric. He wafts the smoke over it like a chef plating a particularly judgmental fish. You whisper to yourself, "So this is what elite laundry looks like." Apparently so. The scrutiny is intense. One woman holds a tiny mirror beneath the hem to inspect for dust. Another uses a wax tablet to note fold tension. You half expect someone to bring out a ruler and a council of toga elders. A new servant rushes in with a fresh batch of tunics from another fullonicae. She looks flushed, frazzled, and, from the faint splash across her sleeve, slightly damp. "From the Aventine shop," she gasps. "Said it was their royal rinse." The crimson-robed woman takes one sniff and grimaces. "Royal?" she scoffs. "Smells like a stable with aspirations." Back the tunics go. You're beginning to understand that the togas themselves are less about function and more about performance. These are not clothes. They are costumes, carefully calibrated symbols of power and purity. No stain may remain. No wrinkle may hint at laziness. The only acceptable odor is success. Some historians still debate how involved emperors were in the preparation of their garments. Were they personally picky? Did they ever comment on scent? Or was it all handled by anxious attendants like these, whose professional lives depended on achieving the olfactory version of nobility? We may never know. But here, watching the full ritual unfold, you suspect they probably did notice and comment, and likely blamed someone when things smelled even a little too natural. The folding process now enters its final stage. 4 servants, standing equidistant, lift the toga like a sacred scroll. Slowly, reverently, they fold it into precise layers. A 5th runs her fingers along the seams with a goose feather, not to dust it, but to fluff the dignity. You almost laugh, then stop, because they're serious. In a nearby alcove, a servant opens a large cedar chest, releasing a whoosh of spicy, sweet air. The folded togas are lowered inside, between layers of laurel leaves and lavender bundles, sealed with a wax-stamped cloth labeled, "Imperial, do not touch unless you have very clean hands." A few feet away, a scribe records every step in ink, type of rinse, drying time, attendant names, temperature, moon phase, just in case, and whether anyone sneezed near the fabric. You realize as you stand to leave that these garments are not simply white because of the ash or the chalk or the rinse. They're white because entire lives are spent keeping them that way. Because togas are how power clothes itself. And no one, absolutely no one, wants to imagine the emperor smelling like a public urinal. You glance over your shoulder one last time as the servants extinguish the incense and begin to whisper about whose shift it is to guard the storage chest overnight. You sigh. Back down the hill you go, where tunics are fewer, hems are dustier, and no one uses feathers to fluff their dignity. But still, you carry with you a new respect, not just for those who wear togas, but for the unseen army who keep them glowing like divine napkins of statecraft. Because in Rome, even laundry is an empire. The path down from the Palatine hums with twilight sounds, the rustle of fig leaves, the bark of a distant dog, and the gentle chink of a wine jug being uncorked somewhere nearby. The heat of the day has softened into a mellow warmth, and the stone under your feet feels less punishing now that the sun's glare has released its grip. You follow the sloping street into a quieter quarter, where the gods live in corners and neighbors nod with knowing half-smiles. Tucked just off a main road, behind a row of shuttered taverns and a bakery that smells like sweetened flower dreams, is a small temple, humble, quiet, and wrapped in ivy. You might expect incense, or chants, or stern-faced priests. What you do not expect is a basin full of laundered tunics, soaking in what appears to be sacred water. A young acolyte, barely older than a loaf of fresh bread, greets you with a bowed head and an armful of damp linens. "Blessings," he says, and "Mind the bucket." You look down, the bucket is steaming. You step back. "Is that divine laundry?" He nods. "Offerings, we wash the garments of the temple's guardians here. It's considered symbolic." You raise an eyebrow. He brightens. The goddess, of cleanliness, smiles upon small labors and large stains. Inside the temple, a single room lit by oil lamps and the low blue hush of dusk, a stone statue watches over the space. She's depicted mid-step, one hand outstretched, the other holding what appears to be as a folded tunic. Her name, you're told, is Purificata, patroness of cleanliness, spirit of order, protector of the properly rinsed. You've never heard of her, but you're not surprised. Rome has a god for nearly everything. Doors, hinges, thresholds, compost piles. Why not laundry? A woman in ceremonial robes moves past, trailing a long sash that smells faintly of laurel and lavender. She's humming softly and dabbing the edge of a tunic with a sponge. "We cleanse the garments," she says, "to cleanse the spirit. Stains are symbolic, as is their removal." You ask if they use standard Fuller methods. She frowns, as if, "You just suggested they wash holy scrolls in seawater." "Urine is for the practical," she says gently. "Here we steep in blessed water and crushed bay leaves, and only on moonlit nights." You glance outside. The sky is already bruising with stars. She nods. Tonight is perfect. In the corner, a novice carefully presses fabric between two smooth stones, murmuring a prayer for steadiness. Another hangs garments to dry on a cord that runs between two statues of household gods, Lares, guardians of hearth and home. One of the gods is wearing a miniature toga, which, you're told, was cleaned just last week. You watch as a child enters, accompanied by a stooped grandmother holding a folded garment. "His birthday robe," the elder says. "Touched the ground. Must be re-blessed." The robe is passed gently to the novice, who bows and receives it like a sacred text. You're beginning to understand something deeper about this place. Here, laundry isn't just maintenance, it's ritual, a visible act of renewal, a quiet sacrament in thread and water. Some historians have dismissed these minor deities and domestic rites as quaint footnotes, women's magic, or superstitions clinging to the hem of real religion. But standing here, surrounded by soft, lamplight and gently drying tunics, it doesn't feel minor at all. It feels essential. Life in Rome is messy, physically, spiritually, politically. Maybe laundry is the only space where people feel they can set things right, one garment at a time. The acolyte returns and offers you a cup of tea, herbal, warm, and slightly bitter with rosemary. Our goddess has no feast days, he explains. Only moments of quiet work. You sip. It's perfect. As the ritual continues, more neighbors arrive, a merchant with an oil-stained belt, a widow with her husband's funeral wrap. Each item is offered with care, received with reverence and handled with practiced hands. One robe has a stitched hem that reads, "May my path remain unblemished." Another has been embroidered with olive branches, delicate and clean. You watch. The novices work, gently turning fabric, smoothing out creases, whispering prayers. Each motion is meditative. Repetition not as drudgery, but as devotion. A final chant rises, slow, wordless, like a lullaby hummed to the gods themselves. You close your eyes. The lamplight flickers. The scent of bay leaf and fresh water floats softly in the air. And somewhere deep inside you, beneath the memory of amphorae and taxes, of stubborn stains and stamping feet, a part of you understands why they do this. Because in a city built on conquest and chaos, sometimes peace can be found in the smallest acts of care. Because sometimes holiness begins in a basin, and because sometimes even the gods need a clean robe. The stars are bright now, sharp pinpricks against a sky turning the color of polished obsidian. The city has quieted, or at least as much as Rome ever does. Even the pigeons seem to have dozed off. You drift along a lamplit street near the Caelian Hill, its stones warm under your soles, still holding the memory of day. And that's when you hear it. A voice, sharp and frantic, hissing from behind a curtain-draped archway. "No, no, 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 that's not my toga!" You freeze, mid-step. A woman's voice, tense, scandalized, and laced with the despair of someone confronting a laundry catastrophe of truly epic proportions. You duck slightly, curiosity piqued, and peer through the folds. The interior is dim, lit by a single oil lamp and a glowing brazier, casting long shadows against an elegantly tiled floor. A man stands in the center, hunched over a garment held between two fingers like it might bite. A toga, a ruined toga. Well, ruined by Roman standards, which means it has perhaps a light brownish streak near the hem. Nothing too serious, unless you're a senator. And this toga, it seems, belongs to one. You've stumbled into a crisis. The man, a wiry fellow with ink-stained hands and a tunic far too nice for someone in this much trouble, turns to the woman and stammers, "It's only a faint mark, barely noticeable." "Barely?" she hisses. "That spot looks like it's been emotionally wounded. Do you have any idea what the press will say if Senator Lepidus shows up tomorrow looking like he's wrestled a wine jug?" You learn quickly that this is a private laundering operation, one that caters to Rome's wealthier, more image-obsessed elite. A place where clothing isn't just cleaned, it's curated, restored, pampered, and right now very, very controversial. The man, whose name is apparently Aulus, insists the stain wasn't there when he delivered the garment to the fullonicae. The woman, Flavia, an aide, fixer, and probable thundercloud in human form, insists that her reputation, her career, and possibly Rome itself are all now in mortal peril. You're not even sure how you ended up inside the room, but no one notices. Or maybe they do, and assume you're part of the cleaning crew. The toga lies limp on a cedar table, betrayed by what looks like a faint oil ring and perhaps a single, plum-colored splash, small but telling. "It's from the senator's son," Flavia growls. "He borrowed it for that Bacchus masquerade and came back looking like he'd fought a wine barrel. We told no one. I paid off the entire household. Now look." Aulus dabs at the spot with a cloth dipped in a lemon vinegar blend. The smell hits you immediately. It's not bad, but it's sharp, like citrus having a panic attack. "I told you to use chalk first," Flavia snaps. "Ash makes it set. Every fullonicae in Rome knows that." "I trained at the Trans-Tiberina school," Aulus replies, with offended dignity. "I once bleached a gladiator's sash to perfection after a lion mauling." "Good," Flavia says flatly. Then this should be child's play. You feel as if you've walked into a laundromatic soap opera. Aulus retrieves a curious device, a paddle carved with soft grooves and inlaid with fine bronze. He wets it, coats it with powdered bay leaf ash, and begins smoothing the fabric with expert rhythmic pressure. He murmurs under his breath, "Cleanliness is composure. Composure is control. Control is everything." You realize this is a mantra, possibly religious. Flavia paces like a lioness. "If that toga isn't snow white by dawn, you and I will both be feeding pigeons for a living." Aulus pauses, squints at the fabric and lifts it toward the brazier's light. He examines the stain, or rather, the former stain, now a faint shadow, like a memory of embarrassment. He dabs it once more with a tincture made from laurel, oil and goat's milk. You're not sure how or why, but it smells expensive. "I can mask the rest with powdered marble," he says finally. "It will hold through the ceremony, but not a second wine spill." "Good," Flavia says. "Senator, Lepidus doesn't drink in public anymore." There's a pause. "Well," she adds, "not since the last incident." A servant rushes in with a fresh sash, and the now restored toga is quickly folded and transferred to a cedar box lined with herbs and silks. A wax seal is applied, and Flavia exhales slowly, as if she's just won a military campaign. You finally ask, cautiously, what would have happened if the stain had remained? Flavia eyes you. He would have blamed his barber. Aulus nods solemnly, and possibly had his toga redesigned with a built-in stain. There's a moment of shared silence, then laughter. Aulus chuckles, then wipes his brow. Some historians write off stories like these, upper-class melodramas, clothing drama, vanity and vinegar. But moments like this, they were everything in a city like Rome. To be seen was to be judged in a stained toga, social exile, or worse, a nickname. "Remember Senator Splotch," Flavia mutters as she exits. "That was over a berry stain the man moved to Sicily." You leave quietly back into the evening. The lamps flicker along the streets, and somewhere in the forum, a flute plays a sleepy tune. And you realize that for all of Rome's might, its legions, its laws, its monuments, the real wars are fought in shadows with soap in back rooms at the hem of a toga, because sometimes the difference between power and scandal is just a faint purple spot. The night deepens. Shadows stretch long and soft across the cobbles, wrapping the city in a hush. Not silence exactly, just a gentler version of its daily roar. A torch flickers on a corner, illuminating a faded fresco of Neptune riding a seahorse that looks mildly inconvenienced. You drift through alleyways and side streets now, guided by memory more than sight, and then you see it, or rather, what's left of it. A broken arch, flanked by cracked columns. Beyond it, the remains of a fullonicae, abandoned, crumbling, half swallowed by ivy and time. Where once there were bubbling basins and shouting workers, now there are chipped stones and tufts of grass poking through the mosaic floor. But the structure's bones are still there. The stone troughs, the water channels, even the old drying hooks rusted into the walls. You step inside slowly, like entering a dream that someone forgot to finish. There's no one here now. No stompers. No chalk. No tang of ammonia. Just ghosts. The gentle kind, who whisper in creaks and smells and soft night air. You run your fingers along the edge of a soaking basin. It's dry, dust-filled and cool to the touch, but in your mind's ear you hear the splash, the slosh, the rhythmic slap of wet fabric, the sigh of someone wringing out a senator's embarrassment. A scrap of cloth flutters from a hook overhead, bleached, almost invisible by the sun. You reach up and take it down. It's brittle, thin and utterly weightless, but you can't help imagining the hundreds, maybe thousands of hands that worked beside it. You picture Marcus stomping in his basin, Gaius muttering about greasy senators, Flavia issuing commands with the authority of a general and the grace of a lioness. Even Lucius, the scent-monger, hawking lavender bombs from his too charming smile. You wonder, where did they go? Did their descendants move on to more refined trades? Did the taxes finally become too much? Or did the city simply move on, forgetting the people who once scrubbed its pride clean? You crouch near a cracked wall where a child's handprint is fossilized in mortar, small, precise, preserved. Some apprentice, maybe. Some quiet, giggling moment between loads. It's more powerful than any monument. A reminder that this space wasn't just for labor, it was for living. The air is cool here, but not unfriendly. You breathe in faint traces of chalk, limestone, old water. It's like the memory of a memory, still lingering. Some scholars write that as Rome transitioned into its later centuries, laundry fell from state ritual to background task, that the great fullonicae shut down, replaced by quieter domestic methods. That as the empire faded, so too did the stomping feet and the steamy basins. But here, under the moonlight, that feels like only part of the truth, because buildings may fall, tools may rust, but the people who worked here left something in the stone, in the shape of the basins, the angle of the drying racks, the carved grooves in the floor meant to carry water to the street, design meant for effort, for repetition, for human hands. You rest on a stone ledge once used for pressing fabric. Moss grows along the edge, softening what was once so precise. You imagine the rhythm, the rub, the rinse, the lift, the entire dance of it, day after day. Life's grit washed from linen, so that pride could walk out into the sunlight spotless. You look up and see a sliver of moon caught between two broken beams. It's white, soft, distant, but it glows, just like the togas once did. You imagine the city waking the next morning, senators groaning into their sandals, matrons inspecting hems, boys running barefoot with bundles of tunics, and fullers rising before dawn, rolling up sleeves, lighting braziers, checking amphorae. And here in this forgotten place, a little echo remains, because laundry wasn't just utility, it was status, it was culture, it was care, and care leaves marks that don't fade easily. You fold the fabric scrap in your hand almost reverently and tuck it into a nook between two stones, not to keep it, to let it stay, to let this place continue whispering its story long after the stomping stopped. You rise and step back into the night. The city hums in the distance, but here, in the ruins of rinse and repeat, there's peace, and the kind of silence that only comes after centuries of suds and steam. You drift downward from the ruins, the night now complete, velvet black, scattered with stars that look like ancient coin dust spilled across the sky. Rome is quieter than it ever truly gets, its breath slowed to a whisper. Even the fountains murmur softly, their waters gentler in the cool. Your steps bring you to the banks of the Tiber. The river glows faintly in the starlight, a silver ribbon winding through the belly of the empire, carrying with it fragments of the day. A dropped hairpin, a withered flower, maybe a few secrets from the bathhouses upstream. You pause at a small stone landing where the faint outline of another old fullonicae once stood, the kind too small to be remembered in maps, too beloved to be forgotten by the neighborhood it once served. Here laundry was hauled in from the river's edge, washed in rush and foam and hung on lines stretched between cypress trees. The air probably always smelled faintly of waterweed, crushed laurel, and fish. A man appears beside you, old, hunched, wrapped in a simple cloak. You didn't hear him approach. He doesn't look at you, just at the water. You can still hear it, he says quietly. If you listen. You tilt your head. Hear what? The rinse, he replies. The soaking, the hands, the work. You listen, and you almost can. Not a sound exactly, more a presence, a rhythm. The ghost of a gesture repeated over centuries. Someone wringing a tunic, someone brushing out a stain, someone sighing at a stubborn spot and muttering a prayer under their breath. The old man chuckles. I once knew a woman who said you could tell a man's character by how he washed his linens. She married a baker who never cleaned a thing. Said, she liked to challenge. You ask him if he ever worked the basins. He nods slowly. 30 years. Before the guilds dried up. Before the taxes made it a thief's job. His voice softens, not bitter, just wistful. I didn't mind the work, he says. I minded that no one noticed. He's quiet for a while, then. But maybe that's what makes it sacred, eh? Doing what needs doing, without a statue, without applause, you nod. Because that feels true. You look back toward the city, the domes and towers resting under the stars. their edges softened by the dark. Somewhere in there, a senator is snoring in freshly laundered linens. Somewhere, a slave is folding a tunic for morning wear. Somewhere, a fuller's hands are cracking from lime water and repetition. You think of the gods of Rome, proud and distant, and wonder if any of them ever noticed the soap-slick fingers of the people who kept their altars clean. Some historians argue that Rome was built by soldiers and statesmen, merchants and architects. But you, having walked these streets soaked in the smells, heard the splash and stomp, you know better. Rome was also built by those who did the washing, by those who fought dirt not with swords, but with suds. Those who knew that behind every fine white toga stood hours of work and feet that ached. You watch the Tiber move, smooth and ancient and eternal, and something inside you begins to slow. Your thoughts soften, your breath deepens. The images of the day begin to fade, and gently, like laundry hung in fog. You see a toga dancing in the wind, a basin glimmering in candlelight, a bucket sloshing, a feather brushing fabric like a lullaby. The city sighs, and you let yourself drift deeper and deeper into stillness, into quiet, into sleep.